facing the consequences of the marginalization of the Ahlul Bayt until today. The fact that the Ahlul Bayt, the family of Rasulullah, were pushed aside and they were marginalized, it is the reason for our suffering today. It is the reason for the fallback of the Muslims today. Because individuals who were not worthy, individuals who were not equipped to rule the Muslims, they came and ruled the Muslims instead of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. The Muslims, they took their Islam, they took their version of Islam, not from the true source, not from the Ahlul Bayt, but rather from the enemies of Rasulullah and the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And when we look at the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, we see that this is very clear. This argument that we are making, it is very profound and very clear, where the haqq, the righteousness, the truth was pushed aside, and individuals who were unworthy, individuals who were very far away from the religion, they came and they started speaking on behalf of the religion. Today, why are we shocked when we see, for example, a group of people like the Taliban or ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they're carrying out acts and they're speaking in the name of religion? Because people before them, they did the exact same thing. This time you find innocent people, they're being killed. 1,000 years ago, over 1,000 years ago, it was the actual family of the Prophet that were persecuted. Don't we talk about Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, how he was killed? How they stood against the family of Rasulullah and killed Imam al-Hussein? The oppression towards the Ahlul Bayt began much before than Imam al-Hussein. In fact, immediately after the death of the Prophet, we see that the Ummah turned against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And this is not something that, oh, look at what these Shias are saying, they're very emotional. No, this is the reality. This is the reality that has been documented in the books of the Muslims. And Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he is one of the most oppressed of the Imams. And he is oppressed at many levels, in many ways. He is oppressed. He was oppressed by his enemies. During his time, the enemy that was standing against Imam al-Hassan was Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, the man who waged a war against Imam Ali. And then he took the power from Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam and he tried to bring his son Yazid, and Yazid ended up killing Imam al-Hussein. So naturally, Muawiyah had a hatred for the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And this hatred did not start with Muawiyah. This was a continued hatred that began against Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. In the battle of Badr, in the battle of Uhud, it was the father of Muawiyah that was fighting Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Then, towards the end of the life of the Prophet, Rasulullah was able to conquer Mecca. And Bani Umayyah, they had no choice other than to submit, other than to accept in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. But then before you know it, the Prophet passes away, individuals come to power, and within a decade or less, Muawiyah is once again in power. This time, he was not brought to power by the kuffar. This time he was brought into power by the establishment that ruled immediately after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he appointed Muawiyah as the governor of Damascus, the governor of Sham. And that is how this man who was very far away from religion, suddenly he's back in power. And Bani Umayyah, they started causing their mischief. They started causing the fitna that the Quran warns about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the cursed tree. الشجرة الملعونة في القرآن. There's a cursed family tree, and that is according to the tafsir, that is the tree of the Umayyads. Muawiyah, once he had a problem with Imam Ali, he began the sab of Imam Ali, the cursing of Imam Ali alayhi salam on the pulpit. And this lasted for over 80 years. Anytime a khatib, Friday prayer, a sermon, the khatib would go out, he would say, Alhamdulillah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Usiku ibadallah, this and this, and curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. It became a part of the salah. It became a part of the sermons, where all the sermons that were under the guidance of the Umayyad government, they would curse Imam Ali. After the martyrdom of Imam Ali, they continued cursing Imam Ali, and then they began to curse Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. One of the men, the narrators of hadith, the son of one of the close buddies of Muawiyah, one of the close friends of Muawiyah by the name of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah was a close man to Muawiyah. He didn't like the Ahlul Bayt. His son, I believe his name is Al-Utbah ibn Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, Al-Hamza ibn Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, the son of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah. He comes to Muawiyah. He tells him, listen, now power is in your hand. Why are you still cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib? Why are you still cursing the Ahlul Bayt? He tells him, what do you mean? You're telling me to stop cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib? He said, I will keep cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Ahlul Bayt. And then he tells him a statement. He says, Umar ibn al-Khattab ruled and he died and no one remembers him anymore. Uthman ruled and he died, no one remembers him. Abu Bakr ruled and died, no one remembers him. But Muhammad, he ruled and he died, and every day we have to hear on the adhan, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then he says, La wallah illa dafnan dafna. I will bury the name of Muhammad. This is Muawiyah. This was the man who became the enemy of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. After the death of Amir al-Mu'mineen, after the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Muawiyah, he started ruling with the carrot and the stick. Meaning some people he will crush them, some people he would abuse them, he would kill them. He killed many of the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Now today there are people that will defend Muawiyah to the death, but they accuse the Shia of criticizing the Sahaba and talking about the Sahaba. Muawiyah killed hundreds of the Sahaba. Why don't you talk about him? Why don't you criticize him? He killed hundreds of the Sahaba and he began the sab, the cursing of Imam Ali, the first Muslim and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Muawiyah, he began to crush any opposition and he began to give out money. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he saw that his supporters were not enough. He didn't have real supporters. He had an army. After the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he became the Khalifa. And today even Sunnis, they consider Imam al-Hassan the fifth Khalifa of the Muslims. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and then Imam al-Hassan. But Imam al-Hassan's official Khilafah rule, it lasted for only 6 months. While his Imamah, he lived 10 years after Imam Ali. Amir al-Mu'mineen was killed in the year 40 after Hijrah. Imam al-Hassan was poisoned in the year 50 after Hijrah. And then Imam al-Hussein, year 61 after Hijrah in Muharram. So Imam al-Hassan for 10 years, and then Imam al-Hussein also for 10 years. But the actual leadership, the actual Khilafah lasted for 6 months. Why? Imam al-Hassan was ready to go to war with Muawiyah because Imam Ali died at a time when he was preparing to go to war with Muawiyah, but he was killed by the Khawarij. Imam al-Hassan is ready to go to war with Muawiyah, but he sees that the people who are with him, they're betraying him. The people that are with him, they're making secret backdoor deals with Muawiyah. Muawiyah tells them, if the battle begins, you hand over al-Hassan and I will give you money. And they were willing to do that. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he was forced to make a truce. He was forced to make a peace treaty with Muawiyah. And this is what they call Sulh al-Imam al-Hassan, the peace treaty of Muawiyah. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he told Muawiyah, I don't need power. The official power you're fighting over, you're willing to kill the Muslims over, I don't want the power. But in return, you stop the fighting. You don't kill the Muslims. You don't kill the Sahaba of Rasulullah. You don't curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. And you do this and this and this. He put on conditions for him. Muawiyah said, okay. And one of those conditions is that after the death of Muawiyah, power, the Khilafah goes back to Imam al-Hassan if he's alive, or if Imam al-Hassan is not alive, it goes to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And this is why we see there's a great role for Imam al-Hassan in legitimizing the movement of Imam al-Hussein. Because today, one of the arguments is that Imam al-Hussein, he fought against Yazid, and Yazid was the Khalifa of his time, and Imam al-Hussein was killed fighting against the Khalifa. But no, Yazid cannot be the Khalifa based on the agreement 10 years ago, or over, more than that, between Imam al-Hassan and Muawiyah. Imam al-Hassan, he gave up power. He goes to Medina, to the city of Rasulullah. He was in Kufa before that, where Amir al-Mu'mineen passed away. Some of the close people to Imam al-Hassan, they would come to the Imam and they would tell him, Assalamu alayka ya mudhill al-mu'mineen. You gave humility. You did not fight. They started attacking Imam al-Hassan because Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam did not go to war. Imam al-Hassan did not fight. But Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he tells them, I could not have fought Muawiyah. I didn't have enough supporters. I didn't have true supporters. It would have been a war that thousands of people would have been killed, and I don't have true and real supporters. Imam al-Hassan was not looking for big number of supporters. He had probably thousands of people in the army, but there was no genuine individuals in that movement that would create a movement. Imam al-Hussein, he had, they say, his 72 companions, but those individuals, they were not going to hand over Imam al-Hussein in the middle of the battle. Imam al-Hussein was sure that he was not going to be handed over. But Imam al-Hassan, he could not trust the closest people to him. Some of them were his cousins. They were willing to hand him over in the middle of the battle, in the middle of the war. So they accuse Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam of belittling and humiliating the Muslims. But in fact, what Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam did saved the religion of Islam. And this is why Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says, إِنَّ الَّذِي فَعَلَهُ عَمِّيَ الْحَسَنِ كَانَ خَيْرًا لِلْأُمَّةِ مِمَّا طَلَعَتْ عَلَيْهِ الشَّمْسِ. He says, what my uncle Imam al-Hassan did was greater for the ummah than what sees the light of the sun. And when they criticize him, they tell him, why do you make a treaty with Muawiyah? He tells them, didn't Rasulullah make a treaty with the kuffar? Rasulullah also, he made a treaty with the kuffar. So I had to make a treaty. This was something that was imposed on me. Rasulullah made the treaty of Hudaybiyah with the kuffar, and Imam al-Hassan did that to preserve the blood and the life of the Muslims. And as long as Imam al-Hassan was alive, Muawiyah could not abuse and curse the Sahaba here and there. This is why he poisoned Imam al-Hassan. This is why even Imam al-Hassan is not in power anymore, but he sees as long as Imam al-Hassan is alive, then he's not going to have the full freedom that he wanted. So he sent the poison to Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And this poison, Imam al-Hassan was poisoned several times in his life, but he would survive it. This was a poison, according to narrations. Muawiyah wrote a letter to the emperor of Rome, to the Roman emperor. He tells him, I want you to send me the strongest poison that you have. So the emperor of Rome, he writes a letter. He tells him, we have a type of poison, but it is against our shara'. It's against our faith, the Christian faith, to use that. So I cannot send that to you. So Muawiyah, who's supposed to be the leader of the Muslims at that time, He tells him, the one I want to use it against is the one who took away your government and took away the Roman Empire. The son of the one who took away the Roman Empire, meaning he's the son of Rasulullah. You have a problem with Rasulullah because Rasulullah came and he expanded, the Muslims expanded, and that made the Roman Empire become smaller. This is his son. So he sends him the poison. And Muawiyah, he sends the poison to one of the wives of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And of course, at that time, the marriages were not because of love at first sight. Some of the marriages that individuals had to make at that time, even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, the Imams, some of their marriages were for political alliances. Imam Hassan's marriage with Ju'da, this lady, this wicked lady, took place during the time of the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, he has the people of Siffin fighting him, the people of Jamal fighting him, the people of Nahrawan fighting him. So in order to create an alliance, Imam al-Hassan, that man, he came and he offered his daughter to marry Imam al-Hassan. Imam Ali alayhi salam, if he would have rejected, that would have caused a big breakthrough, a big shift in the power dynamics at that time. So Imam al-Hassan, Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam al-Hassan agreed. But this lady, her father was one of those people that turned against Imam Ali. And her brothers, one of them kills Muslim ibn Aqil and the other kills Imam al-Hussein. And she poisons Imam al-Hassan. Imagine what kind of a family this is. Muawiyah tells her, I want you to give the poison to al-Hassan, and in return I will give you money, and I will give you my son Yazid to marry. So she goes, she poisons Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, and then later on she comes to Muawiyah. He tells her, I'll give you the money, but I'm not going to give you my son Yazid to marry. You killed the grandson of the Prophet. I don't trust you with my son. My son is too dear to me. This is one of the ways Imam al-Hassan was oppressed. But Imam al-Hassan was oppressed by his enemies, by Muawiyah, from all the cursing, the attacks. Even some of the Shia, they turned against Imam al-Hassan. As we mentioned, when they call him Ya Mudhilla al-Mu'mineen, you're the one who humiliated the believers, the Mu'mineen. Isn't that a type of oppression against an Imam? When people compare Imam al-Hassan with Imam al-Hussein, for example, they say Imam al-Hussein was brave, and Imam al-Hassan, he was soft. Imam al-Hassan, he didn't want to fight. The answer is that every Imam, they do what is their duty at that particular time. If Imam al-Hassan had not signed the treaty with Muawiyah, then Imam al-Hussein's movement would not have legitimacy. Each Imam does what is their own obligation. The other issue is Imam al-Hussein, he stood to fight Yazid because Yazid, in front of people publicly, he would drink, he would declare, he would say poems that declare that he's against the religion, against the faith. لعبت هاشم بالملك فلا خبر جاء ولا وحي نزل. Bani Hashim played with power. There was no revelation. There was none of that. Muawiyah, on the other hand, he was deceiving. He was conniving. In front of people, he gives the impression that he's a religious person, that he's a mu'min, that he cares about the religion. This is why today when you find some Salafis and Wahhabis, when they defend Muawiyah to the bone, they come and they say he is Khalul Mu'mineen. He's the uncle of the believers. Because Rasulullah married Habiba, the daughter of Abu Sufyan. So therefore, Muawiyah becomes the uncle of the believers. They don't say the same thing about, for example, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, who was killed by Muawiyah, who also, he's the brother of Aisha. They don't say any of that. Only Muawiyah. Or the one who wrote the Wahi, the one who wrote the Quran. And they made so many fabrications. And this is natural because Muawiyah ruled for over 40 years and he paid people, he paid narrators to write fabricated ahadith, praising him and criticizing and attacking the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So this is one of the things that Muawiyah did. So he was oppressed by his enemies. He was oppressed by some of the Shia that were criticizing him. And while Imam al-Hassan was preparing to go to war with Muawiyah, a man from his own side, he comes and he takes an axe and he stabs Imam al-Hassan in his thigh. This is in his own camp. Imagine if he's going out and fighting. This is why Imam Hassan saw that he cannot trust these people that are with him. And Imam Hassan, he was oppressed by the Umayyads and even the Abbasis. Even the Abbasis who came hundreds of years, over 100 years later or so, he was also oppressed by them. Why? The Abbasi government ruled for a very long time. Over 500 years they ruled, but they did not like Imam al-Hassan. Because when they first came to power, some of the descendants of Imam al-Hassan, some of the children of Imam al-Hassan, they revolted against the Abbasi government. So they started making fabricated ahadith, fabrications against Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. So you see, Imam al-Hassan was oppressed by the Shia, those people that accused them of, betraying the Muslims, by Muawiyah, by the Abbasis, and until today Imam al-Hassan is oppressed. Where's the grave of Imam al-Hassan? Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, his grave has been demolished. Over 100 years ago, or close to 100 years ago, the Wahhabi Saudi government, they destroyed the grave of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, and Imam al-Baqir, and Imam al-Sadiq, and Imam Zayn al-Abidin. There was a shrine in al-Baqi', there was a grave, a mausoleum where people would go and visit. But they came and they destroyed it. They came and leveled it with the ground. Today when you go to Baqi', they don't allow you to visit Imam al-Hassan, the grandson of the Prophet. They don't allow you to stand in front of the grave and say salam to Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. And they totally destroyed his grave. The night of the Shahada of Imam al-Hassan, according to some hadith, Imam al-Hassan was poisoned on the 7th of Safar, or he passed away on the 7th of Safar. And another hadith says he passed away on the 28th of Safar, in the year 50 after Hijrah. On the day of his Shahada, we cannot cry for him. We cannot visit his grave. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, despite all that happened to him, you find people, they're always visiting his grave. His shrine is visited by hundreds and thousands and millions of people. But no one visits Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. This is why, my dear brothers and sisters, we have a duty towards the Imams of our time. We have to acknowledge the Imams, and we have to get to know them. We have to learn about their life. We have to read about their hadith, read about their sayings. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam was known for his generosity. A generosity like no other. Where the hadith says he gave away all of his wealth. All of his wealth. He gave it away 2 times in his life. And he gave away half of his wealth 3 times in his life. Meaning everything he would give it away. He would go and perform the Hajj. 25 times he performs the Hajj, walking on his feet all the way from Medina to Mecca. Not because he didn't have a camel or he didn't have a horse or anything. No, he would walk and he would have the camels and the sheep walking with him because he wants to sacrifice them once he reaches there. This is Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. He was known for his akhlaq. He was known for his demeanor. He was calm like the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. When a person would insult him, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, what do people do when you're insulted? If someone insults you, naturally people, they do the same insult again to that other person. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam would not do that. He follows what the Quran says. لا تستوي الحسنة ولا السيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن فإذا الذي بينك وبينه عداوة كأنه ولي حميم. Allah says the good deed is not equal to the bad deed. If someone has an animosity with you, a problem with you, repel that evil, not with evil. Repel it with good. Repel it with forgiveness. Repel it with love. That will change that relationship of animosity. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ. You have animosity with this person. كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. This person will become your wali. This person will become your friend. A loyal friend that respects you. This is what Imam al-Hassan did. How do you think Rasulullah managed to bring these people close to Islam? Through his akhlaq. And same with Imam al-Hassan. Let me conclude with this story. A man, he comes from Sham. This man has been brainwashed by Muawiyah and by all of that criticism against the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. You know, Muawiyah, he created an environment of cursing the Ahlul Bayt where people, they truly thought the Ahlul Bayt were bad people. They thought the Ahlul Bayt were horrible people. When they heard Imam Ali was killed, some people in Sham, they asked, how was he killed? They tell them he was killed while he was praying. Some people said, Ali prays? Wow, Ali prays. Imam Ali was the first man to pray with the Prophet, the first believer in the Prophet. So a man comes from Sham. He sees Imam al-Hassan, he comes to Medina. He sees Imam al-Hassan and he begins cursing at Imam al-Hassan, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he tells him, أَظُنُّكَ غَرِيبًا. I see that you're a stranger here. You're not from town. وَلَعَلَّ لَكَ حَاجَةً. I see that you're a stranger and you might need something here. فَلَوْ اسْتَعَنْتَ بِنَا لَا عَنَّاكَ. If you need anything from me, tell me, I will serve you. وَلَوْ سَأَلْتَنَا لَأَعْطَيْنَاكَ. If you ask us anything, we will provide for you. وَلَوْ اسْتَرْشَدْتَنَا أَرْشَدْنَاكَ وَلَوْ اسْتَحْمَلْتَنَا حَمَّلْنَاكَ. Do you need a place to stay? Do you need something to ride? Do you need food? Do you need clothes? Do you need all this stuff? The man was shocked. I just cursed. I just threw all the foul languages at this person, and this is how he talks to me. The man began to cry, and he says, this is Allahu a'lam haythu yaj'al risalatah. God knows with which kind of people He should entrust with His message. It should be people like you, not people like Muawiyah who are cursing and using foul language. It should be people like the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And that man, he says, I entered into Medina having hatred for Al-Hassan and the family of Rasulullah, but when I left Medina, their love had filled my heart through their actions. Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, despite the fact that he gave up power, Muawiyah poisoned him. And he was fasting. His wife, she brings him that poison. He's breaking his fast. So he breaks his fast and that poison enters into his body. And immediately it begins to have an effect on his body. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, he calls his brother Imam al-Hussein, and he calls the family of Bani Hashim, he calls them, and they bring a bowl. The Imam was vomiting all of that blood. Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, she walks. Imam al-Hassan, he hides it. He does not want her to see that her brother is vomiting that blood. Only if Zainab, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam did not want Zainab to see him vomiting that blood. But Zainab had many more trials to endure. Zainab had to see the head of Imam al-Hussein in a tray. Zainab had to witness all of the calamities. Imam al-Hussein, he saw his brother Imam al-Hassan, he began to cry. Imam al-Hassan tells him, oh my dear brother, do not cry for me. I cry for you. فَلَا يَوْمَ كَيَوْمِكَ يَا أَبَا عَبْدِ اللَّهِ. There is no day like yours, O Aba Abdullah. When over 30,000 are going to stand against you and fight you. Imam al-Hassan, he passed away in his home, around his family. He had asked his brother Imam al-Hussein that if it is permissible, if it's not going to cause a problem, let him be buried next to Rasulullah. And if it's going to cause problem, then bury him in Baqi', next to the grave of Fatimah bint Asad, the mother of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Imam al-Hussein, after Imam al-Hassan passed away, they washed the body of Imam al-Hassan. They took him out of the house. They brought him near the house of his grandfather, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, Marwan ibn al-Hakam. and the wife of the Prophet, they came out and they say, take away who we do not like from the house of Rasulullah. And according to traditions, they began to shoot arrows at the body of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So Imam al-Hussein, he takes him to Al-Baqi'. He places Imam al-Hassan next to the grave that he was going to bury him in. And Imam al-Hussein begins to cry. He's ready to bury his brother. He begins to say, أَأَدْهِنُ رَأْسِي أَمْ تَطِيبْ مَحَاسِنِي وخدك معفور وأنت سليب بكائي طويل والدموع غزيرة وأنت بعيد والمزار غريب غريب وأطراف البيوت تحوطه ألا كل من تحت التراب غريب فليس حريبا من أصيب بماله ولكن من وارى أخاه حريب. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the ziyarah and the shafa'ah of Imam al-Hassan and the love of Imam al-Hassan in our hearts, where that love will guide us in this life and it will save us and be a source of pride for us in the akhirah. والحمد لله رب العالمين وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات لا سيما إلى روح من اجتمعنا لأجلها نهدي ثواب الفاتحة مع الصلوات. Brothers, please, there's dua kumail.